Welcome to the Living Out podcast, helping people, churches and society talk about faith and sexuality.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Living Out podcast, where we are continuing our series answering your questions. So far we've had episodes on experiencing same-sex attraction, on the church, on friendship, and our most recent episode was talking about parenting. And actually we had so many questions on parenting that the last episode we focused on under 12s, and in this episode we're still on that topic, but thinking today about parenting 12 to 18s. My name's Andrew, I'm the Emerging Generations Director here at Living Out, and I'm really thrilled to have two guests, both I think first-time guests on the podcast, both parents with lots of wisdom and expertise to bring to us. I'm joined by Robin Barfield and Jennifer Kvamme. Welcome both of you, thank you so much for joining me. Maybe since you're new to the podcast, you could give people a quick kind of 30-second intro to who you are, where you are, what you do, whatever you want to tell us really. And Robin, I might start with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm based in the northwest of England. I've been in kids and family and youth ministry for 25 years in kind of local parish settings. I've got 4 children of my own, aged between 11 and 20, and plus a dog, which always just adds an element of mayhem to the situation. Currently, I'm lecturing in practical theology at Oak Hill College in North London.
Brilliant. And I just remembered, actually, you have a podcast I think is really important. Just mention quickly your podcast, Robin.
Thank you. Yeah, I do a little podcast called Everyday Dadding with my friend Ben Putt, and we just discuss kind of life as dads and the joys and the struggles that we face and face various questions, tackle various questions through that.
Most importantly, my memory is you shared dad jokes at the beginning, so that is a reason to tune in, if none other, right?
Sometimes they're the best of dad jokes and sometimes they're the worst of dad jokes.
Which are the best, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Robin. Jennifer, it's great to have you with us. Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, it's a joy to be here. So I serve in student ministry at my church, overseeing middle school and high school, and I have been there for like 21 years, my whole adult life. So yeah, I love teenagers. I love helping them to really just see the beauty of the gospel, see how it affects all of life. And I have 3 of my own children as well. My oldest is 13, so we're just kind of entering the teen years in our home as well.
So begin to think about these questions then for real life context for you.
For sure. It's different when it's at home.
Yeah, absolutely. We here at Living Out became aware of Jennifer from her brilliant book, More to the Story, which is a great book on sexuality, gender-related topics for teenagers, which we'll mention later, as well as mentioning some of Robin's work as well. Now, we start every episode before diving in with our listener questions about parenting with a bit more of a light-hearted question to get the conversation going, which this time has also been submitted by one of our listeners. And today's question is, if you had to write a song to explain marriage, what genre would you choose and why? What a great question. Robin, have you thought about this? Do you have an answer?
My answer to all of these questions would always be jazz. And that's not just because I'm a big fan of jazz, but simply jazz is about making up as you go along. Do you know? And so there's a sense in which you kind of you've got the basis, you know where you're starting from, but half the time you're working it out, you're improvising and playing off each other and trying to sing together in a way that doesn't create a cacophony. But so that would be my answer.
That's very good. Yeah, that makes good sense. I like that. Jennifer, what were you thinking?
Well, I love songs that have kind of the full dynamic range where you have kind of the quiet, like contemplative part and then like the full pounding rock. So I don't know if that's like rock opera, what we're going for here, but I think that would express well kind of all that marriage entails. So.
Yes, I like that. That does work well. That probably has an overlap with mine. It will be no surprise to anyone who's a regular listener. My answer is musical theatre. My answer is always musical theatre. But I think musical theatre style is the obvious one. Musical theatre is all about the ups and downs, the big emotions in life. Marriage has ups, marriage has downs. And as anyone who listens to the Living Out podcast knows, marriage tells a story, a greater story, the story of Christ and the church. How do you tell story through music? Musical theatre. Obviously, marriage the musical is the way to go.
Andrew, I think that's cheating.
Cheat.
That's cheating because that's not actually a musical genre, is it? Because that's kind of covers every musical genre.
Well, okay, let's go for classic. We'll go
classical.
classic musical theatre then. We'll have some big dance numbers, all that kind of all that jazz.
George Gershwin, Cole Porter.
Yeah, that's a bit early for my liking. But don't drag me down the. Also, my colleagues would be rolling their eyes. The team members were here right now. He's on it again. Let's not go there. We'll pause there. Great answers, thank you. We'll be back in just a moment, starting with your questions on parenting. So let's start with our first question. Thinking about the topics of sexuality, gender identity, what is the best parenting advice you've ever received around those topics? Or you could say, what's the advice you wish that you'd received? Jennifer, I'm going to come to you first on this one.
The parenting, if you would call it advice, that I come back to for myself probably most regularly is, I remember a friend who said, it's so tempting to think that if I could be the perfect parent, then my kids would be perfect. And just that we need to remember, hey, our kids have a sin nature just like we do, and they need Jesus just like we do. And so kind of how that, it just removes, I think, a big burden from us to remember that even if I am perfect, which I will never be, my kids are not going to be perfect either because they need Jesus. And that he is sufficient for everything that I need in parenting, and he is also sufficient for what they need because of the lack of my parenting or just because of their own needs. So I find that encouraging.
That is so good, so helpful. Thank you. Robin, what about for you?
Yeah, thank you. I love Jennifer's answer. I think I want to push back to the uniqueness of the child that God has given us. And what that means is that somebody else's parenting may not be the best thing for your child. And just picking up a book on the shelf, as parents, we feel guilty at every possible step. And we're looking for the simple solutions, that the kind of 5 steps to a grace-filled child kind of solution. And that sense in which God says, I've made your child unique and I've trusted them to you, is not an easy answer, but it means we don't need to compare, and it means that we need to do jazz. we need to work it out. And work it out according to the gifting, the personality, the joyful bundle that God has given us.
That is so helpful. And maybe that's just it's relevant all through parenting, but especially the topics we're kind of talking about today. We can often want simple answers of how do we talk to our young people about topics like sexuality and gender. How do I respond if this happens, if they say this? And actually it's not one size fits all. And actually we can, even today, try and share some wisdom, some insights. But actually it's about journeying together, and also getting it for a Christian parent, trusting that the Holy Spirit in the moment at the right time will give them the words to say, whatever's needed in that context. I think that's such helpful insight. Here's another question, a bit broader. Someone's asked us, what advice would you give to parents of young people about how to love and support their children and keep them looking to Jesus for the future? How in general, especially in those teenage years, how do we parent in a way that's trying to help young people keep looking to Jesus to the future?
One thing that comes to mind is just not to be afraid of their questions and doubts and struggles. I think sometimes when they bring up something heavy or questions that we feel like we don't have a good answer to, it kind of scares us. And just to remind ourselves and each other that those are opportunities, that God is doing something, that it's actually better for them to wrestle through those things and wind up hopefully with a deeper faith on the other side. So just remembering that questions and doubts are not a threat to their faith. It's hopefully part of how they grow. To remember that Jesus is the truth, and he has the answers, so we don't have to be afraid of the times when we don't have the answers, but that we can just kind of take that journey with them.
That's something we've talked a lot about here, actually, especially when we've talked to parents in Kaleidoscope and our youth series and the training for parents there. This idea of actually parents accompany young people on the journey, and the importance of making space for questions, doubts, disagreement, objection even, actually, and that actually it's just our role to, as adults, as parents in their lives, to accompany, to journey alongside as God leads the journey. And again, that maybe takes off some of the pressure, but also can be scary, can't it? 'Cause it feels like we're abandoning young people, but actually, no, we're entrusting them to God in that.
And I think that's one of the difficulties as we come to the 11 to 18 age group, that we our parenting models are often quite straight when it comes to children, often focused around discipline, but by which often we read control. And then as they reach their teenage years, suddenly their world is getting bigger, and they're encountering a bigger world, and they're trying to work out how this old faith that they've inherited from you is it plausible in the face of these new things that they're experiencing, seeking, experimenting. And so the doubts come in, and our natural reaction as parents is to keep parenting in the way that we would parent a child. And that doesn't work. Well, it may look like it works, and we might be able to box them in until they're 18, but then when they're 18, it explodes. And actually, part of parenting teenagers is beginning to let go and let them make mistakes, which is painful and difficult. And we pick them up on the other side of that, but also walking graciously with them as they wrestle with these things, knowing that as they wrestle with them, it's not the beginning of the story for them, and nor is it the end, God willing. We're walking through it with them. And so I think a lot of parenting teenagers, for me, and having observed kind of where I've been ministering, is patience, gentle, gracious, listening, patience. They know what you think. They know what you. If you've done the childhood bit right, where we're opening the Bible with them, we're praying with them, they're part of a church family, they'll know what you think about these things. It's not time for the lecture. It's time for the gentle question. It's time for the listen. It's time for the prayer, rather than a kind of 10-minute download of chapter and verse for them.
And that patience thing is really key. It reminds us, actually, I've heard from you before, Robin. You mentioned the point of, teenagers can change their mind multiple times in a day and really do change their mind, because there are these emerging adults working out, what do I actually believe, what do I actually think, and then actually for a parent just to accompany alongside, but to be patient and realise just at the moment a child might be taking a position or landing a place you feel quite uncomfortable with or wish they weren't in a sense. I think your message was not to panic about that. It's all a normal part of teenage years. There's lots of changing, thinking, working through, and so it's an uncomfortable place maybe for a parent, but just the patience in that is really important, and see how God leads things over time.
And I think that's right. And I think that Jennifer's point in terms of coming out to a place stronger in the end is really key. And therefore, I don't want to say it's a good thing that they're wrestling through these things, but that sense of wrestling with their faith in the teenage years is really vital, so that they don't assume the faith of their parents, but they make it their own. And part of that will be pulling it apart and trying to put it back together again. And if we can help them to do that, as Jennifer said, that they'll come out so much stronger in the end.
I was reflecting just yesterday, and I can't remember what made me think of it, of how, for me, actually, it was wrestling with my sexuality, my faith in my teenage years, which I think laid the foundations of the fact I'm still following Jesus a decade and a half later. Actually, it was having to ask big questions, having to go through some difficult times, basically, actually, and really wrestle with it, and not being easy. As much as I look back and think it was one of the most difficult times of my life, it's also one of the times I'm most grateful for, because that, becoming an adult and wrestling with and engaging with really difficult, tricky questions just helped me, I think, push down roots. And as so often, God doesn't he, the difficult things in our lives to bring good, to bring growth, to bring strength into the future and stuff. I think that's, so important and so helpful to remember, especially important to remember as we're looking from the outside and feeling uncomfortable. I think, no, God is at work and does work through those situations. And one final question in this section, I really like this one. Someone has asked, what is the best way to talk to young people about singleness being a gift from God? Such an important thing for us to do, especially in the light of cultural messages, often also church messages young people are hearing. Any good ways we've seen or experienced or thought of to talk to young people about singleness as a gift?
I think that's such a great question. I love that someone asked that because I think sometimes it gets a little bit forgotten. I would definitely take them to 1 Corinthians 7. I love that Paul just talks about how singleness is a gift from God, and that just the opportunity that a single person has for a different kind of single-minded devotion to Jesus. Because marriage, while, it's such a wonderful picture of Christ's love and such a good gift also, but it definitely is something that takes a lot of our time, and especially when kids are at it, it's a whole other thing, right? And so just to honor the singles in our lives and our family's life, the people that we know, and to point out ways that they are serving and loving Jesus, to not treat it as a different kind of, category. Just like there are different ways of honoring Christ in our lives. There are different paths that he might call us on. Both of these things are good and are of God, and are opportunities to honor and glorify God. And I think to help them think about both marriage and singleness as less about what makes me happy and what's going to be, just the best way to get what I want. And how is this an opportunity to serve others and to ultimately honor God in whatever path he leads us down.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I was reflecting on this a little bit and just thinking, actually, in some ways, it's helping them to feel it as much as helping them to know it, I think. And they may well know already that it's good to be single, but actually do they feel it deep down? And I think that's where having, as Jennifer pointed to, having single friends, church friends, not just there, but actually involved in your life, and see live with them in the struggles of being single, but also share in the ministries that they have and the joy that they have, actually is really important as a family, as for your kids to see wholeness. So they don't just know it in their heads, but they're seeing it enacted, and they're beginning to feel it. Not that it's an easy solution, but then if they live with you as a married couple, they'll know that marriage isn't easy either, and sometimes that can just begin to help them explore what that looks like and what that feels like together, I guess.
I was thinking very similar. I was struck the question asked the best way to talk to young people, which is a good thing to do about singleness, but I was struck, I wonder if the mess or the power of example is even more important and even more powerful. Especially we know young people today really value story, value real life, value authenticity. They're looking for how does Christian faith make a difference in real life. And I think often it is just in real life examples, people around us, that can most clearly be seen and communicated to young people. So maybe actually the best thing to do for your kids is to make sure there are single people involved in your lives, involved kind of in your family, inviting them in. And I think you're right, Robin, that helps them actually feel this is good, this can be plausible, rather than having kind of an abstract answer to that. But I was also thinking, if we are talking about talking, I think often the thing parents need to think about is not what we do, or not what we say or how we have good conversations, but I think what we shouldn't say. And I still hear my friends who have kids, they make statements like, when they get married, or talk about the future husband or wife or their children. And even me, I have a little emotional reaction in that of feeling, I'd be such a disappointment to you if I was your child. But also thinking, if the child hears that, that's sending a big message actually about obviously success is marriage, and even putting the pressure on mum and dad want you to get married. So I think just being really careful actually, trying to cultivate a heart that wants for our kids what Jesus wants for them, whether that is following him in marriage or in singleness, rather than having a vision of marriage and future for our children, which is, I think, just unhelpful and can put some pressure on children and send unhelpful messages about marriage and singleness as well. Thank you. We'll pause there. We'll be back in just a moment with some more of your questions on parenting.
Here at Living Out, one group of people that we really want to help and support are youth leaders. And that's why we've created our Youth Leader Network. The network exists to equip youth leaders as they help young people to navigate questions of faith and sexuality. When you become a member of the network, you will receive regular newsletters several times a year, and every edition will highlight for you some resources, some key events, and things just to equip you as you continue in your ministry. You'll also have access to our youth leader forums, which are opportunities for members to gather with other youth leaders, discuss key topics, and to hear from the Living Out team. As well as that, you have the opportunity to submit your questions at any time to the Living Out team, and we will answer those in our email updates. And there's plenty more that you get access to by becoming a member of the Youth Leader Network. Membership is completely free, and you can sign up by heading to our website, find the Youth Leader area and that Youth Leader Network page. You can sign up there. Do that today.
So this question has come in, and it's about parenting a same-sex attracted child. Someone says, how can you best help a son or daughter understand biblical truth while simultaneously and primarily loving and accepting them, encouraging them in their faith, helping them to believe they're not an oddity or a misfit, and helping them witness to Jesus? How do we do that thing with holding together biblical truth while communicating all the love and grace and encouragement we want to as well? I've no doubt many people, parents listening to this, will be asking those kind of questions. What kind of thoughts do we have on that?
Yeah, again, I think for me, it goes back to that sense of being there in the wrestling and being there in the conversation. That parenting isn't a lecture that you deliver once for all the saints, and nor is it just letting them get on with it. Actually, it's sitting with them in the tears. It's sitting with them in the late night conversations. It's being prepared to be there at 2 a.m. When the crisis hits. It's weeping with them and praying with them through it. It's that whole sense of being a parent is someone who holds their hand as they work these things out, and sometimes actually, that as hard as it may be, it may be, certainly for a time, letting them choose not to live your way, letting them choose not to live God's way, even knowing that actually forcing them into a position of doing what you want is not actually obeying God in the long term, and therefore being prepared for the even bigger crash potentially further down the road. This is your children are not your children just while they live at home with you. They will be your children for 30 years, God willing, after they've left home, and that maintaining that relationship is really key, so that even if for 20 years there's a rejection, a struggle, a rebellion, whatever it might be, being able to keep that relationship with them and care for them and pray with them and welcome them as much as you're able through that. This is not a short-term, hey, we can fix this. This is I'm your father and I love you, and being there for them even when they're the prodigal son.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I read that question and I'm like, man, there's in some ways not an answer you can just give in a couple of minutes. Like, I just want to acknowledge that can be such a hard place for parents, and there's not simple answers. And some of it you talked about, just trusting the Holy Spirit to, kind of give you words in the moment. I think that's so important, because so much depends on where your kid is at, where they're coming from, and their level of openness, where your relationship is, and all sorts of other things that it depends on. So I think just, for parents to be really sensitive to the Spirit, to be just keeping your own relationship with God really solid and listening, to know, so some of it depends on, is your child wanting to follow Jesus in this, and, wrestling through it, and how, that's a different level of conversation that you can have. I feel like one of the verses that I love coming back to in a lot of different contexts that are around sexuality is Jesus' parable of the buried treasure in Matthew 13:44, where, this man finds treasure buried in a field and then goes and in his joy sells everything he has to buy that field, because he knows what he's getting is so much greater, and how that's a picture of, man, yes, Jesus calls us to give up all sorts of things to follow him, like actually everything. But we can do that joyfully because what we get in Jesus is so much better. It's going to be a really different conversation if your child is not even wanting to follow Jesus at the time. And in that case, probably your focus is going to be kind of on what Robin was saying, of just keeping that relationship really healthy and being present and showing your, unconditional love and your willingness to walk with them in hard things, your willingness for them to disagree and to live, differently, and that I will still be here and be a safe place for you to land, when that happens. And obviously just to keep praying through that.
And that'll vary between the ages of 11 and 18. Those conversations, the amount of being, of an 11-year-old, we can still say no to an 11-year-old. With an 18-year-old, it's much more, we sit down and we go, I don't think this is wise. You're pretty much an adult. You have to make that mistake, and we love you and we'll be there for you. But you need to know that we don't think this is the best thing for you, but you're always our child. You're always deeply loved by us and loved by God, and we're there for you. So that'll massively vary on age, and part of that will be the working out and walking with your child through those years.
Mm-hmm. This will link us really nicely to the next question, which was similar, but actually it's asking, what if the young person isn't a Christian and the parents are, and they've shared about sexuality or gender struggles, and actually this question is particularly asking, what if they don't want to discuss it, the young person, or don't want any outside input or help? Would you in that instance just therefore ignore it, leave it, pretend it's not there? Would you try and find ways to have conversations? What would your instinct be in a situation like that?
I think, I don't want to just say it depends again, but I think it kind of does. I think going back to prayer is just essential, because God can be doing things in their hearts that we don't have access to sometimes. And just as parents, like I said, our own relationship with Jesus, our own community and support and all the things that we need so that we can approach it in a healthy way. I think being careful that we're not trying to control them or just trying to do behavior modification. Obviously their choices and their behaviors matter, and they can have serious consequences, and we can talk about those things. But just that we keep in mind that our primary goal isn't behavior management, that we really want to be after their hearts, and we want to just think long term about, our end goal is we want them to know Jesus and be close to him and be following him, while keeping in mind that everyone has a different journey, and some of them are a lot windier, and Jesus can still, go after the prodigal son in that far off place. And so not to lose heart in that. My instinct wouldn't be to totally just drop it, but I do think we need to be careful that we're not just pushing them away by continuing to bring up conversations that they're really opposed to, that are just going to create a relational barrier that's going to make it harder for us in the long run. I would maybe try to find ways to speak things that they're more receptive to, and maybe for a time that means focusing less on the sexuality things and more on Jesus. Are they open to some of these conversations just about what does it look like to be following Jesus? Maybe it's focusing on some of the practical things, the real life consequences of hey, where do you see these choices taking you in the long run? What are your goals here, your fears? What do you want out of this? And just helping them learn practical wisdom. So again, I think it depends a lot on the kid, on their age, and on their openness, and on your relationship. But those would be a couple of things that come to mind.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking as you said that, of my children, some are talkers and some are not talkers. And some are listeners who will get cross, but then you'll realise that they've listened later. Some will be talkers who want to talk at the most inopportune time. And I think that's the kind of the nature of being a parent, that they'll want to talk to you about it just as you're, I don't know, putting your shoes on to go out to a meeting, or just trying to get some sleep after a late night, and it's those times where not shutting down the conversation will be really key, and you have to take that patient deep breath of, okay, this is an opportunity, this is a privilege, they want to talk about it now, let me open my heart and listen, and first stop, just listen. The fact that it's taken them to that moment to be able to say, I want to talk to you about it now, is really key. So I think, again, that kind of patience, it'll depend on the personality of your child. It might depend how deep it is in them to have that courage to talk to dad or mum about something that they know that you're going to struggle with. They don't know how you're going to respond. So partly it may just be putting the marker down and going, I'd love to talk to you about it when you're ready, and I love you, so that they don't have that fear that dad's going to explode and go, how dare you get out of the house, or whatever might be their worst kind of fear, their worst nightmare.
That's really good. I love what that kind of statement of, whenever you're ready, if you want to talk about this, I'm up for that, is showing the door is open. That's what was my reflection on the question of, and the most important thing is a parent trying have things in that situation where the door is open, so if the young person decides they do want to talk about it, they can. And that links to what you said, Robin, and I often hear this from parents of teenagers. It's always the worst times, it's the middle of the night or whatever, that a teenager wants to talk, but whenever you can, to take that opportunity against showing that door open. But also I was reflecting, just as you said there, that in any interaction we have, how we respond is so important, so powerful. I feel like as a parent in that situation, you almost want to try and be unshockable, so that a young person really does feel we really can talk about this, and we can talk openly, and I can share anything about this with you. And even though internally you might be totally being shocked and being freaked out, actually if you can just seem really calm and just really gentle, and so a young person gets experience in the fact this is actually a safe place for me to talk about this, even if I don't expect it to be, then that in the next time will make them think, oh, actually last time that was okay, and maybe even actually mum or dad had something helpful to say, I think I'm up for that conversation again. So I think of how we can open the door, how we can then try and do anything we can to show that it is then going to be a safe conversation and a helpful conversation. It's really powerful in that context.
Yeah, I think in part because they know where you stand. It won't be any secret or surprise, and therefore for them to say that to you is huge. It's not something that they've just kind of woken up this morning and gone, hey, I think I'm going to talk to mum or dad about this. And this goes back a long way. And therefore they've probably been thinking through, how do I say it? When do I say it? Really working themselves up. And therefore when that conversation does come, the parent's reaction is so important.
Brilliant. Well, time is really quickly running away with us. Let's just, the final thing, think about other things that parents could turn to help them with these kind of questions. One question that came in is, what kind of resources can be provided to students and young people who may be struggling with issues related to sexuality or relationships? We can also throw in resources for parents as well. And I'll start us off. We have two authors on the podcast with two great resources. One is Jennifer's book, More to the Story, Deep Answers to Real Questions on Attraction, Identity and Relationships, aimed particularly at teenagers, and I think one of, if not the best book on the market for teenagers, covering lots of ground around these topics and related things in really clear ways, really biblical ways, really sensitive ways as well. And actually what I loved, in quite a nice kind of conversational tone as well. So the way we've talked today about just kind of having that sense of journey alongside, I think this book does some of that. So highly commend that for young people. And Robin has literally just published a growth booklet called Young People and Pornography, Understanding and Responding Pastorally. aimed, I think, particularly at youth leaders, but also really relevant to parents, just helping us understand the huge issue of pornography and sexually explicit internet material, how we can understand some of the impact that's having, how both in a church youth group context and a family context we can be seeking to help young people to navigate that difficult part of the world they're often exposed to. Any other resources you guys can think of, whether for young people themselves, teenagers, or for parents of that age group when it comes to these topics?
Chasing Love by Sean McDowell, I found a really good kind of overview of sex and relationships generally, which I actually read with one of my teenagers. That can be, that there can be an awkwardness about these conversations, actually, if there's a sense in which, hey, let's read it together. It's not my words. You can begin to push through that awkwardness, and so can they. So I found that quite helpful, as well as applying the handbrake on pornography. That got some caveats on it, but I think it's a really generally a good thing on pornography for teenagers to read through.
Brilliant. And you can find reviews of both of those actually on a website to find out a bit more about them. Anything that came to mind for you, Jennifer?
I think we've talked about how stories can just be so powerful in the lives of students. And so I think books that tell people's stories of how they have wrestled through some of these things and come to deeper faith in Jesus can be really powerful. So I think of like Jackie Hill Perry's Gay Girl, Good God, Beckett Cook, A Change of Affection, and Rachel Gilson, Born Again This Way would be some of my top recommendations along those lines. And then Christopher Yuan's Holy Sexuality Project, that's like video-based, talking through a lot of these topics. So if your student is not a reader and video is better, that can be, and it's geared for parents to kind of do with their kids. So that might be a helpful resource.
Brilliant, thank you. And two things that came to mind for me, Ashley, who's also living out team, and I were at Keswick a couple of years ago, did a couple of seminars, one for parents of younger children and one for parents of teenagers, and we'll stick the link of that along with all the links to these things in the show notes. And of course, we've got our own video series, Kaleidoscope, designed for 11 to 18-year-olds, whether for use in a church youth group, whether actually your young person comes to you, has loads of questions about these topics, you as a family, as parents, and your young person can work through that together. And within there is training specifically for parents, actually, which is kind of relevant to Kaleidoscope, but is relevant more broadly as well. So if you just want a bit more input directly for parenting around these topics, head to our website, find Kaleidoscope there, sign up for free, and the parent training may be helpful to you. Well, that's all we've got time for today. A big thank you to Jennifer and Robin for being with me, for all your helpful insights and wisdom. Do take a look at the show notes for links to all of the resources we've just talked about to keep exploring these topics. And don't forget to rate us, leave a review for the podcast, to like and subscribe. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. Our next episode, the final in this series, where we'll be looking at your questions on evangelism. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye.